Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
We political analysts are sometimes made fun of as intellectual gymnasts. So here we are doing exactly that, you might think, but do tell me in the end if we arrive at the right conclusions or not. But right now it might look like a stretch if I ask you what is the connection between the International Arbitration Court's order in The Hague in the Netherlands, in which Vodafone wins its claim against India's retrospective tax of 20,000 crore rupees, and the oncoming Bihar elections, which got announced just today as I am recording this, which is Friday this week. Now you might say, Shekhar Gupta, you are nuts. What can there be common between the two? But here I am. I think both have a connection because both represents the most important fight in Indian polity, which is between old economy and old politics on the one hand and new economy and new politics on the other. What is the Vodafone retrospective tax order? That is representative in its own way of old economy and old politics. Why? Because Pranab Mukherjee, who brought in that order, was very proud of it. It destroyed India's economic growth at that point. It destroyed Manmohan Singh's stature. It did a lot of damage to India's economy. But he thought, and he always said this even to me, he said, look, whatever happens, what is Vodafone? What is this Supreme Court judgment? We are the sovereign. And don't worry, I could mimic him in front of him and he would laugh. He had a big heart. So we are the sovereign. Who is Vodafone? Who is this? In fact, if he was around even today, he would have said, what is this arbitration court? This is another country. This is Republic of India. He would have thrown the might of the Republic against it, challenged it immediately, which Government of India routinely does with these decisions. He would have challenged it and maybe even amended something once again within India to make sure that India would not lose it. He would make it like that. Second, he was a man of old politics. That's why in the third volume of his memoir, which I wrote about in a national interest, of which I am giving you a link, I had noted that he had in fact, instead of being defensive about his Vodafone order, he was actually boasting about it. And he said, look, I did it, everybody criticized it, but there must be some juice to it. I mean, my words, not his. Or I'd say there must be some oomph to it that several finance ministers after that had not dared to touch that amendment. Chidambaram didn't, Jaitley didn't, Nirmala Sitharaman didn't, nobody did. So he says there must be something, and in 6 years, in a decade since he made that change was not reversed despite the damage it did. And those years included 6 years of Narendra Modi and his full majority government. So why was he so confident this will not be changed or challenged? Because he was also a believer in old politics. Because this was a sovereign power asserting its authority. तुम कौन होता है? Court कौन होता है मेरे सामने? I can amend the constitution. I can amend my law, etc., etc. Now, look at Bihar. Bihar is India's most complex state politically. It's also the most old-fashioned because Bihar in so many ways lies at the other end of the economic spectrum. What is Bihar at this point economically? Bihar is essentially India's poorest large state or largest poor state, you can choose your description. It's also India's largest exporter of cheap labor to the faster growing parts of India. If you saw all these migrant laborers going back, a bulk of them were from Bihar and eastern UP adjoining Bihar, and then maybe Jharkhand adjoining Bihar also. But Bihar is India's premier exporter of cheap labor. That is not to say many bright, brilliant, white collar people do not come from Bihar, they do, but Bihar is also a large state. Bihar's own economy is in a shambles. So even if you reform the economy nationally, what happens is Bihar is at the other end of the economic pipeline. So the benefit of reform will first come to fast growing states, and as then you go ahead, the pipe gets narrower, narrower and narrower, and then sclerosis builds up as it does everywhere by the time you reach Bihar. So Bihar is not a state that benefits immediately from reform. Now the challenge for Narendra Modi is that Bihar election is coming so soon after his most audacious and political risky reform decisions, that is labor and agricultural reform. So does he go to Bihar elections saying, look, I am reforming, I am brave, I am doing stuff nobody has done? All these idiots like Shekhar Gupta used to say, when will Big Bang reform come? When will Big Bang reform come? So here it is, labor and agriculture, one is big, the other is bang. What else do you want? Will he do that? Or will he now do a reversal, at least in political campaigning, because every election in India is an important election. Nobody wants to lose an election, least of all the election in a very large state in the Hindi heartland, because BJP depends on the Hindi heartland, Gujarat and Maharashtra, to give its majority in national parliament. So in that case, will he de-risk himself and say that Bihar mein nahi karo, go there with the welfare slogan? I've already talked about LPG and toilets, etc. Now there is Nal Se Jal. We've given them all free grain during the pandemic and also transferred some more money. So talk about that, maybe promise to double that, because that is a tried and tested formula. Why try something new? So here is the challenge for Narendra Modi as we see it. One, on Vodafone. Old economy demands and old politics demands that he should do nothing. On the other hand, he should get the government to challenge that decision, and even if the challenge fails, do something with the law. Basically say, I am Bharat Sarkar, I make the rules, right? I am the umpire, I am the player. Either I win, if I lose, I declare the other side the loser. So that is the call of the old economy, old politics. Will he now have the courage to say, or the reformist or modernizing instinct to say, what was done was wrong? We should have respected the Supreme Court judgment, but UPA government did not do it. I did not change it out of respect for Pranabda. But now that this International Court of Arbitration has done so, I humbly, or India respects it. Humbly is an expression I am adding, because when I say humbly, I will say gratefully also. Why gratefully? Because in a way, this arbitration court has given India the opportunity of burying this ghost, because it would have been very difficult and very inconvenient to do it in the political system right now, given how problematic it has become in India and how problematic and how divided Parliament has become. Because doing this would have immediately, through Parliament, because you would have had to amend the law in Parliament, would have immediately given the opposition a chance of saying, so you are sold out. In this case, this is an opportunity. The opposition will still say so, but will Narendra Modi have the courage to do so? Similarly, in Bihar, will he this time go back to the call of the old economy and old politics, again sell welfareism to the people of Bihar, or will he go there now and try something different? Which is to say that, look, in all these decades, you have produced very little by way of blue collar jobs. Forget white collar jobs. All your people are going to other parts of the country and working, most of them, vast majority of them, in low value professions or low value avocations. Here is my opportunity to modernize your state. It is essentially an agricultural state. I will modernize your agriculture with my reform, and with my labor reform, etc. I will help bring more industry to your state. That is the test on both sides. That's why we say there is a connection between Vodafone and Bihar. Both are a test of Modi government's commitment to new economy and new politics. Old political argument against the new reformed economy is formidable, because our own lived experience tells us that a government in India, an incumbent government, finds it impossible as yet to win an election by seeking votes on its record of reform. You might say that, oh, 2014, Modi made a promise of economic reform and won an election. It is true, but that's the reason I'm taking anticipatory bail and closing this argument right now. In 2014, he was not the incumbent. He was the challenger. So a challenger can promise reform, but an incumbent promising reform or going to elections on a record of reform has not worked as yet. 2004, Vajpayee lost famously or infamously on the promise of India shining because he had a couple of years of very good growth. And Congress party believes that it lost in 1996 because of Narasimha Rao's reform, and even 2014 because of Manmohan Singh and Chidambaram's commitment to reform. So in that environment, would you now see a political leader again showing the audacity or risk-taking ability to go to the polls promising reform? Because the reason that's important in India is that reform in India is usually carried by stealth. That is something that Montek Singh Ahluwalia wrote in his book Backstage also, and he said that in his conversation with me on our ThePrint's off the cuff show as well. He said, look, people reform by stealth because they know that economic reform does not get you the votes. Now, why does it not get you the votes? Because growth by its very nature, and you cannot help it, growth creates inequality. Any growth that comes, it's wrong to say that the rich get rich and the poor get poorer. The poor also get less poor. But compared to those who get richer, those poor feel even poorer compared to them. People compare each other. So what happens is those who become visibly much richer are much fewer than those who feel left out. So to feel left out, you don't have to become poorer than before. You only haven't become as much richer as the other guy. And that's why reformers often get punished by the voters. Now, this is something which was brought to us very clearly by Bill Clinton. When he had become ex-president, he had come visiting, and there was a dinner for him at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. And he said there, look at this strange country and look at this strange democracy. There was a government here that was giving 7% growth. 7% at that point was a lot. 7% growth. And in spite of that, that government lost. And you know why did that happen? That's because those who do not benefit or who do not benefit as much as the few who do are so many more that a grievance builds up despite the growth. The other way of putting this is the old-fashioned sort of the fund manager's way, which is that simplistic fund manager's way, which is that a rising tide lifts all boats, but it lifts the yachts first. Now, the same thing can apply to the states in a country like India also, that any growth boom will benefit Maharashtra, Gujarat, Haryana, Andhra, Telangana, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu. It will not similarly benefit, say, West Bengal. It will not similarly benefit Odisha. It will not similarly benefit Punjab either. And Bihar will be left last in that pipeline. If that is the case, and the Biharis then have to see, oh, Maharashtra is doing so much better, Gujarat is doing so much better, so why risk it? That's why this is a twin challenge. Now, politics in Bihar is always complex, and local factors, especially caste, are formidable there. Yet, this is an interesting election because this is our most bad news election in a very long time. Why? Because this election is taking place at a time when the Chinese are at the doors and not going away, when the pandemic is showing no signs of leaving us alone, and also when the economy is in a free fall. So how does an incumbent go to the polls based on his record in this situation? At the same time, how does an incumbent talk of reform in a poll like that unless he talks of his own performance? this becomes doubly complicated in Bihar, because this time in Bihar, given that Nitish Kumar has weakened over time, his hold has loosened, and also because of the way BJP wants to run this campaign, they want to seek the votes much more in the name of Narendra Modi than in the name of Nitish Kumar. So if Modi is a true reformer and a believer in minimum government, he would bury the Vodafone ghosts now. He would also then go to Bihar campaigning on his latest political controversial reforms. देखा जाएगा जो होगा. Both will need him to dip deep into his accumulated political capital and expose it to risk. On whether he gathers the courage to do these or not lies the answer to our central question. Will reform be brought center stage of our politics by him now or not? Because if he doesn't do so, our reform will continue to be done episodically by stealth in the dark of the night.